South Korea's president caught in a scandal and fighting for her political life. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. More than 100,000 South Koreans are expected to take to the streets in protest this weekend as demands for the resignation of President Park Geun-hye continue. Park is embroiled in an influence peddling scandal that's seriously threatening her position as leader of South Korea. The crisis focuses on Park's longtime friend and confidant, soon-sil, who has been charged with meddling in state affairs. She's also allegedly abused her relationship with the president for personal gain. President Park has already apologized to the nation for showing her friend drafts of speeches.
I did it with a sincere intention to be more meticulous in looking over things. But whatever the intention was, I am sorry. I have caused concern among the people and caused alarm and heartache. I deeply apologize to our nation.
Tens of thousands have taken part in protest rallies over the last 2 weekends, calling on the president to step aside. And that pressure looks set to grow even more this weekend. To discuss all of this, joining us now via Skype from Seoul, geun-hye. He's a lecturer at the Graduate School of International Studies at Yonsei University in South Korea. Also with us here in the studio is Eun Lim. She is a lecturer in Korea Studies at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. From Beijing, we're joined by Aina Tanjin. He is an international affairs commentator and advises the Chinese government. Also joining us in the studio is Ji Abby Lee. She is a social media reporter with the Voice of America and travels frequently to South Korea. Welcome to all of you to the show. Eun, let's start with this scandal. How did it start?
It's a very complicating scandal, so that is why probably worldwide now people are trying to figure out what's going on there. Probably in terms of just corruption pattern, it might be not that different. I mean, it might not be that different from any of those previous experiences. But this time, unusually or unprecedentedly, this lady, Miss Soon-sil, she is not actually affiliated with any governmental position. And another thing is she is not a well-known kind of expert in any specific field. So that might be the key distinction between any previous corruption-related issues and this specific scandal.
Right. So who is Soon-sil? Is she just a confidant, a friend of the president?
They had built up this kind of friendship for more than decades, almost like 4 decades, but they knew each other through Ms. Soon-sil's father, Pastor Che Tae-min. Many media actually criticized him as a kind of, Rasputin, who was like manipulating. Back then, I mean, the first daughter, Park Geun-hye, of the President Park Chung-hee,
right,
who was the kind of absolute dictator at that time.
The accusation is that she has been too close to the president and actually has been making decisions or influencing decisions that the president has been making.
Yes, that is why now South Korean people are that frustrated. We didn't expect that our president was like manipulated or played by another person who is trying to hiding herself actually behind the curtain. But I personally don't think Ms. Soon-sil was like manipulating everything. Rather than that, probably from President Park Geun-hye's point of view, Ms. Che has been like almost the only friend or the only person who she can rely on, because if you think about all this tragedy President Park Geun-hye experienced, for example, her father was assassinated or her mother was killed by another like assassins too. So thanks to all this tragedy, probably she shut down her minds to anybody else.
You think there's an element of sexism here?
Oh, yes, nowadays it looks like more Western medias or even political scientists also talk about that.
Okay.
But I don't want to exaggerate that side too much.
Okay, let's bring in geun-hye from Seoul. And geun-hye, the president has been accused, she's also been accused of undermining the constitution. And as you watch this crisis unfold in South Korea, I mean, is she going to be forced to resign, or do you think she can survive this crisis?
Well, in brief, the ongoing crisis has brought huge challenges to not only the President Park Geun-hye, but also to the ruling party and the opposition party and the general public. So I mean, simply think about the previous decisions and proposals she has made in the past year in the timeline, going to China's military parade and decide to deploy that and propose to revise constitution. But it's not quite clear whether she will be forced to resign or not. So the ruling party actually has indicated reconciliation among different groups in National Assembly. So I think it will be too hasty and risky to force President Park to resign immediately.
Gee, there have already been protests in South Korea. Thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest against the president. There's even a bigger protest planned for this weekend.
Right.
What exactly are the protesters calling for?
So they are still calling for her to resign and for her impeachment, but that's highly unlikely, like he just mentioned, because it's a very complicated process, and also it's only a year before the next presidential election. So I think the left wing will probably want to let it ride as long as possible, and then when people's anger is still fresh, they'll try to have the next presidential election and then elect the president they want.
So she'll be allowed to see out her term. What's it, 15 months left, right?
That's right. A little over a year, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ina, how closely are these events in South Korea being watched by China? What are China's concerns here?
Well, China has a number of concerns. There's been some flashpoints that have gone on, overfishing, over THAAD, over the decision to share intelligence with the Japanese. These things are all leading towards a situation of uncertainty. Add on to that the situation in the US with Trump, and you have a very toxic mix. All sides are looking for what is going to be happening in the future.
Eun-jung, President Park has already apologized. In fact, she's apologized twice to the nation, and she said that she's prepared to accept an investigation, a direct investigation of herself. Let's take a listen to what she had to say. Let's watch.
이 모든 사태는
These latest developments are all my fault and were caused by my carelessness.
일어난
She also said that she was perhaps over-trusting in her relationship with her friend. How are South Koreans responding to the apologies?
Again, her second apology, to be honest, sounds very sincere.
Right.
That might be a kind of general perception or impression, but the thing is, probably that's not what we wanted to hear from our national leader. Rather than just apologizing sincerely, or rather than just showing her that kind of sadness or whatever, those feeling betrayed by the closest friend or whatever, rather than that kind of personal expression, rather than that, we strongly wanted to hear more decisive decision by the nation's top, by the country's top figure, the top head. So that is why probably people got much more angrier actually than before. The second apology stimulated actually more. So that is why we observed that massive protest, last week. So again, this weekend can be another threshold, whether or not I don't know how many people can be gathering together, but probably many people assume that this weekend can be really threshold for the incumbent government. So let's take a look.
Geun-hye, if we look beyond South Korea and look at the impact these events in the country are having in the region, a question I just put to Ina as well. How do you think this is impacting the relationship with China?
Well, I think only if President Park chooses to resign under pressure, that will create, certainly uncertainty for South Korea's domestic politics, and that's to its relations to countries like China. And the point is, there are a few potential candidates for next year's presidential election, such as Kim Il-sung and Ban Ki-moon and Ahn Cheol-soo, but it's not clear who has the biggest chance. So the chance is that President Park takes the back seat, and still China has to face a relatively weaker president, but maybe a relatively more strong prime minister in the future.
Gee, President Park made history when she became the country's first female president, and she came to power on an anti-corruption ticket.
Right.
The fact that she hasn't accomplished much in that regard, is that perhaps driving the opposition as well.
That's true. And I think the feeling of betrayal is probably the most prominent sentiment that South Koreans are feeling because the previous presidential scandals all involved some kind of family members, right? Their brothers or their sons. But this time people are thinking, well, she doesn't have any family members apart from her estranged siblings. That should be okay. But it turns out it actually kind of became even more of a shock because predictability is somewhat comforting, right? And then $70 million is a lot of money, but it's not some kind of amount that South Koreans have not seen. But this time it's just $70 million, and it involves someone who is completely unrelated to her in any, not a blood relationship, and is also a daughter of a cult leader. I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff up. It's like a page out of a South Korean drama script. There is that tragic family history, and then there is this Rasputin, and then there's this money and power. It's really mind-boggling to a lot of people.
As you point out, President Park, there is a tragic past here.
Mm-hmm.
How do people see that? Is there any sympathy for her?
Yeah, so the right wing definitely felt, okay, her dad is known as a dictator, but people do not entirely detest him because during his leadership, the economy prospered a lot. So they were hoping that, yeah, she is a daughter of him, so she must be doing something good for the country, but it turns out that wasn't the case. And like actually Eun-jung mentioned in one of her articles, people thought of her as this Iron Lady, but turned out to be more of a Rapunzel than an Iron Lady. And that, I think, was a huge disappointment for a lot of people.
Aina, Seoul's foreign ministry has said that President Park will not be attending the Asia-Pacific leaders meeting, which is going to take place in Peru later this month. That meeting was supposed to discuss, and will, of course, will be discussing the security situation on the Korean Peninsula. What do these events in South Korea mean for security in the region?
Well, as I said earlier, it's about having a lot of unpredictability going in. It's quite possible that North Korea will try some sort of gambit to test the resolve of either South Korea and the U.S., especially since you have this weakness in South Korea and Trump in the United States. So it's a toxic mix at this point, and it requires strong leadership, but you don't have that. So I think she's going to have to resign either in fact or step back completely and allow the opposition to put in a government and take a leading role.
What kind of impact, Aina, is this having on the economy in South Korea?
I don't think it's having a direct impact on the economy at this point, but Samsung obviously is. I mean, there are almost 20% of the GDP that's export GDP. This is a big issue, and it really goes to this issue of these large family-owned companies, these chaebols, who have been dominating the situation. So it's going to be, in the past, it would have been something where the government would have taken action to help save face, start investigations, these types of things. But without that certainty there, it's going to drift.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. Much more on the political crisis in South Korea that could force the president out of office. All that when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.